Welcome to the Jagged Moon podcast. My name is Dr. Paul Hamilton, and this is Professor Hunter Reeve. Our topic today is Cyclone, Cantata, death, dying, and mourning. So the specific occasion for our podcast today is the death of my mother, Rosemary Hamilton, on October 30th of this year. And what we want to discuss today is how the experience of her death and dying connects to the myths about death and dying, and also what literature has to say about these things. And so it's sort of like a testing of the experience of what actually happened against the the comforting illusions that people have about death, and also kind of the deeper wisdom that we have in the great literary tradition that comes down to us. So I will just begin by saying that my initial experience is shock and trauma. And I think that a lot of people don't talk about this. It is a sense of dissociation, because you don't want to accept denial. You don't want to accept what's actually happening. Dissociation, confusion, bewilderment. And it takes a long time to begin to process what actually happens when a person is in the process of dying. And that's sort of my initial experience. So Professor Reeve was my mother's best friend for many, many years, more than how long?
60 years.
60 years. What are your kind of opening thoughts here?
I really honor your thoughts and feelings, Paul, and I think it's Cyclone Cantata is the theme of our talk here, and I think it's like a storm. It's like a rhythm of death. It dims finally, but it's always there in a sense, and then there's some healing, but I again reiterate that it is a storm, and it's very frightening in the beginning, and it isn't pleasant, or as you say, Rosemary didn't accept her death, and she didn't go quietly into that good night, and I think you'll talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first sort of illusion, and I remember hearing this from a friend who was a doctor many, many years ago, that when people are close to death, they seem to be acquiescent or peaceful or accepting. I think that many of us would like to believe that, and certainly when I came back to the hospital to visit my mother shortly before she died, she was anything but acquiescent. She was, and at the end of a process that had been going on for about 3 years after an accident, a driver ran a red light and smashed into her and caused tremendous trauma to her body, shattered the lower part of her legs, which had to be rebuilt with titanium, and nearly destroyed her spleen. And I feel like she was wrenched away from life, or she was ripped out of life. She was not, passing peacefully into another world. She was wrenched, violently from life. she was had a life that she loved, and she was just ripped away from it. And when I came to see her, I think, she was still fighting valiantly against the prospect of dying. And I think that she, so much so that I really thought that she was going to recover, and that she would get better. She had a very steep downturn, but in retrospect, I think that the whole experience was deeply traumatic, and that people don't sort of prepare. Maybe there's nothing that somebody could say to prepare you for it. I think that representations of deathbeds are just often very false. I mean, I think that many people, and certainly my experience was, when she had her final illness, which was an infection, just denial, disbelief, horror, and when I first saw her in the hospital, she was in a delirium, and she looked up and she asked me if I was the Lord, and yet you would think that would be a comforting kind of vision, deathbed vision, but it was not. It was a tragic, confused reaching out in the midst of a storm. And I think that Professor Reeve Hunter put it very well. And so I want to bring in a little bit, I want to hear Professor Reeve's reflections on this, but I want to bring in some of the poetry of trauma that helps us to understand that the connection between emotion and what we're actually experiencing doesn't often happen, or sometimes doesn't happen immediately. Maybe doesn't even often happen immediately. And certainly when I saw my mother, it's just she was in a welter of confusion and trauma, and also rebellion. She was in. I feel like in some respects her last months and even years were just almost like Job or King Lear, a great register of protest against against life and the terms of life that what life had thrown at her, the kind of not to I don't think it's hyperbole to say the kind of crucifixion that she endured over the suffering is absolutely unimaginable. So I wonder what your thoughts are on those last months and years of her suffering.
Yes, I think she indeed suffered, and in the beginning, when she was terribly injured, I went to Arizona to visit her for several weeks, and she was in such pain that she could hardly move, and they had a little enclosure that they had to get her in so they could move her. She couldn't move, and they couldn't move her out except with this special apparatus. And I wrote a poem about this, that she was miraculous in that she was suffering so much, but she did rebound, and that's how she survived 3 years, but it was with terrific pain. And this is in part how I survived too, by helping her. And the poem is entitled Not Drowning. It was a momentous winter. You were hit bad, damp, cold, incessant, raining, flooding, fragmentation, wreckage. You were treating your red scars, exhausted. Both of us, I sat by your bedside. Your hand was shaking. I kissed it. Your energy somehow was slightly renewed, blood returning. Right now I'm not drowning. Rain continues. Spring will come. So that's an example of how she suffered. And this happened throughout those 3 years.
Yeah, it was a great traumatic experience, and I think that it was just. I think that what was so heartbreaking and tragic is that all of the bravery it took for her to get through those early stages, and she did enjoy some brief respites where she was relatively pain-free and was able to visit her grandchildren and visit with us and enjoy her life, but those were far between. And in the end, in those final weeks when I visited her, I feel like the experience of she was doing what she had done throughout, which is to do what she knew how to do, which was to fight on. And I think that she had fighting for a purpose, because she wanted to live, but she also wanted to be there as a parent, as a friend, as a grandparent, and so she was just absolutely. I've never seen anybody fight as hard as she did. She was just absolutely ready to get out of that bed, to get over that infection. She wanted to go home and to resume her normal life, and so I want to give a talk about this trauma, give you some poetry to think about this. And I mean, I think what was so difficult for us is that we were powerless to help her in the middle of this trauma. And I think that Emily Dickinson captures this very well in this poem, "A Dying Tiger." The sense that you are powerless to help someone who is dying, and how far away you feel. The closer that you want to be, the farther away you feel to them. A dying tiger moaned for drink. I hunted all the sand. I caught the dripping of a rock and bore it in my hand. His mighty balls in death were thick, but searching I could see a vision on the retina of water and of me. 'Twas not my blame who sped too slow. 'Twas not his blame who died while I was reaching him, but 'twas the fact that he was dead. And that image of his mighty balls, his eyeballs in death were thick, but searching I could see a vision on the retina of water and of me is incredible. That idea that you are reaching out to comfort somebody on their deathbed, and you somehow cannot reach them, but she sees a vision on the tiger's retina of water and of me, as if burned onto the retina, or as if reflecting back like a mirror. There she is with the water that she could have given the tiger, but can't because he died. The dripping of a rock and bore it in my hand. What an incredible visionary poem about that, just captures that sense of the powerlessness to comfort a person in that shock and trauma. Did you have any thoughts about that poem, Hunter?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to say that powerlessness is indeed a theme in that poem and the tragedy of it. But also there's heroism of the poet, the speaker, indeed trying to save the tiger in any way she could. And I think that's, although it's difficult, tremendously difficult, the speaker has so much heroism, as Rosemary did, in fighting. And even though she was powerless in the end, we don't know after she died her power, her energy, because we haven't traveled that journey. But that's due for another podcast.
Right. There's another poem that I think also kind of captures the more tender aspect of tending on someone who died, by Emily Dickinson. It's called The World Feels Dusty. The world feels dusty when we stop to die. We want the dew, then honors taste dry. Flags vex a dying face, but the least fan stirred by a friend's hand cools like the rain. Mine be the ministry when thy thirst comes, and Hybla balms, dews of Thessaly to fetch. I think that really resonates with my experience. Flags vex a dying face, but the least fan stirred by a friend's hand cools like the rain. I remember giving my mother some Coke, not knowing that this was the day before she died. And she was so enjoyed the taste of that, that it was, I could tell it was like a balm. And she says, mine be the ministry. And I think that Dickens's poetry, incidentally, is a kind of ministry. I mean, she finds the language for those times where there is no language. Hybla balms, dews of Thessaly to fetch. I think that she describes the comfort that you can give to a dying person, the dews of Thessaly. What think she has. She has done that. She's brought us language for these times that are where there seems to be. It seems impossible that there could be language. Did you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I do. Yes, I think that it's wonderful that just the idea and reality that you were with your mother and you could give her sustenance with a Coke, and she loved Coke, because I had many experiences knowing that and giving her Coke. And I think that is so tender, like the speaker of the poem, when you're able to assist someone in need. And it sounds corny, but it's not at all. It's life's minutes of glory, really, when you can do that for an individual. It's heroic.
Yeah, I think that it certainly is. I have to say that I've forgotten that she actually wanted Coke, but we didn't have it. We only had Sprite. But she still enjoyed it. I have to be honest. I had thought about that. But so I think that we're talking about the trauma and the pain of a person dying, and I think that there's some kind of a myth that you have this, moment like at the end of the Titanic, and you have this kind of cathartic grief when a person dies. And I think that may be true with some people, but sometimes, or quite often, the situation is so traumatic that it's impossible for your brain. Your brain just doesn't comprehend it. It doesn't take it in, and it takes a long time for you to begin to sort out the anguish of what happened. And when I think that Dickinson writes beautifully about this as well, which is that that this feeling throughout the entire dying process, as if there's something that you can't reach, as if you're in this kind of stunned silence relative to your feelings, and that you feel just unable to reach the pain. Dickinson writes this great poem about this experience. There is a pain so utter, it swallows substance up, then covers the abyss with trance. So memory can step around, across, upon it, as one within a swoon goes safely where an open eye would drop him bone by bone. This so utter it swallows substance up, then covers the abyss with trance. Covers the abyss with trance. Is that you're walking across this abyss, but you're in a kind of a trance. And somehow within this sort of drunken swoon, you pass by through this experience where an open eye, if you were to be awake to what you actually felt and processing what actually was happening, it would just drop you bone by bone. It would just crush you to pieces. I certainly think that that was certainly the case with that, the experience, certainly of the night my mother died. It was one of those. It was an experience where it was yes, very, very painful, but also oddly numb and dissociated, and the there's a delay between the experience of it and the actual feeling of it, and it took me, weeks to process. I was, there when my mom died, and I was holding her hand, and there was a moment when I was holding her hand, and I could just feel the ice, the blood turn to ice. It was just suddenly the cold coming in, and the chill in her hand. It was very sudden and very palpable, and the trauma of that, the grief surrounding that moment, is something that it took me weeks to be able to begin to feel. An open eye would drop him bone by bone. That's the experience, and it's this thing where everybody is, the doctor and the nurses are there, and you're going through this experience that people is profound, and that people is traumatic, and yet you're not really fully able to experience it. It's almost like an amputation or something, where you get a limb cut off, and you don't even know that the limb has been cut off until you have this kind of phantom limb syndrome, where you're there, and it's important that you be there, and that it's important, but you're not fully processing it all.
Yes, it's indeed a terrible shock. And when Paul told me his mother had died, and described some of it, I went into deep shock, and it really affected my body. I don't think people talk about this very much, but I know many people that tell me the same thing, that it really affects them physically and spiritually. And it took me a month just to feel better, my body not to be so achy and painful, as if I was suffering like she did, or in sympathy. And things like that happen, and it's a rhythm. It's a cyclone cantata. It's a certain rhythm that continues and dims a little bit in the second month. People tell me, and I experienced that, but it's something very traumatic, as Paul was speaking about.
Yeah, a deeply traumatic, and I think that I don't know what other people experience, or if, but it seems to me that the once again, there's a great poem by Dickinson about this. She talks about, I think that the idea that, like we were saying earlier, that displacement, a dissociation from trauma. She writes, there's another great poem about mourning and suffering. After great pain, a formal feeling comes. The nerves sit ceremonious like tombs. The stiff heart questions, was it he that bore, and yesterday, or centuries before? The feet mechanical go round a wooden way of ground or air or aught. Regardless grown, a quartz contentment like a stone. This is the hour of lead, remembered if outlived as freezing persons recollect the snow. First chill, then stupor, then the letting go. Incredible. So, it's that after great pain, a formal feeling comes. And it's just that sense that there's just that you're looking down on something that is incomprehensible. I had told you before that when she was in this delirium, she was relating these dreams that she'd had of different situations. There were Peruvian gangsters who were holding her at, knife point, and Chinese kidnappers. And other people wouldn't understand, but these, we had, have close connections to Peru. We had a Peruvian exchange students, and we visited there, and we still have very, very close connections to our Peruvian family, we call them. And it was as if these parts of our past were coming back in this great upheaval, and in this great surreal kind of storm. And I of course, I also live in China, and so the fact that the Chinese kidnappers come in, it's as if all of these themes in our life were coming back in this aggressive persecutory form, and in this great kind of churning upheaval. And it was like watching, through the symbolism of these dreams, it was just like the essence of everything that our family was together, and our past and our history was on fire. It was just in this churning, like you said, a cyclone cantata, this burning, churning, symbolic essence of what was going on. And she was right at the center of that storm. And it was just but the thing about it is that it was her storm, but it was also our lives together that was going up, and that was being wrenched around and kind of going up in flames. And that was what was so difficult. And it was as if she had become porous, and was just as if her dream content was just drawing us into it, because it was not just her dream content, it was the dream content of all of us together. This was all of our experiences together was what was being drawn into this upheaval. And I feel that, it's just that her empathy and her was so great that she just drew in swaths of our lives together and drew them into that storm that she was in. I didn't hear it, but I'm sure that there was a Moroccan gangster as well, drawing in your experience. I just, just happened not to have heard that part, but it was all there. And it was not like what people describe, for example, this delirium that she was in the end was not like what people describe with senile dementia. It was this encompassing symbolic terrain that she was in that was just drawing everyone into it. It was not what people described, or kind of a vast black hole or cyclone, we call it, that was just drawing it was like the Wizard of Oz, the cyclone in the Wizard of Oz, where it just draws up the whole house and everything churning around, like, the witch is there and everything. I mean, it just this vast symbolic cyclone cantata that where every theme and motif of our life together was ripped out and recontextualized in this process. And I mean, I don't know what anybody does with that. It's not what anyone can prepare you for, and how do you, in your emotions, how do you respond to that?
Yes, indeed. Is the Cyclone Cantata. And I just wanted to speak a little bit more on a vital theme, and that's the theme of love. Because just Paul being with his mother, and I had my smaller part, but love is so vital in this, and I think that it carries over, and it isn't schmaltzy, it's true, and it's just, I repeat the word vital, and I want to recite a poem called The Knife of Love, because it provides some part of the themes that we're talking about. While I'm looking for this, I'll keep talking. Paul, why don't you talk a minute while I find this?
Yeah. I mean, I think that what you were talking about, the love being such a that you also, in that midst of that storm, in the midst of that cyclone, experienced love as real. I mean, there was that moment which I felt was sort of the dark, moment of despair. There's sort of like Christ's moment on the cross, of the nadir, moment when she was talking to Hunter on the phone, and she said, we're all alone. She said, isn't it true that in life we're all alone? And Hunter responded by saying, no, we're not alone. We're with you. And I could see a change in her eyes as she heard that, and a change in a softening in her tone, and she understood that she wasn't alone.
Well, I'm glad I interrupted the talk, because that was so beautiful what you talked about, Paul. Thank you. This is called The Knife of Love. The knife of love sharpened itself on my heart. I traveled in a red valley of lightly shining trees. Relief found me, and I knew we would meet again. Though we were so far apart, it was chancy. Angels sang in the body of a cat who longed for consuming affection. A bright blue light appeared by my side, proving my spirit. I hope our meeting is soon. They say I'm old. The knife of love sharpened itself on my heart. This is really a poem where I am seeking love and meeting love again in a friend or a loved one. And it relates to what Paul was talking about, that minute by minute, hour by hour, we don't know if we'll again be met by love, but it does happen and it can happen. And I think we wait for it and we treasure the times. And we treasure the times that we seek it in nature, beautiful sunset, flowers, the color of flowers, a look of even a flower growing in the back of a apartment building that's beautiful. It doesn't have to be in a so-called magnificent scene. So that's what I wanted to talk about, and I'll read another poem in a few minutes about rosemary.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I think that, it's this experience that, how do I put this? The utter, insult and trauma of dying does have, it's like that line from the Dickinson poem, Hybla Balms, dews of Thessaly to fetch. The the comfort from a friend, that a friend can offer to somebody who's dying. It can be like the sweetest balm. Let me find that poem, which is called The World Feels Dusty. The world feels dusty when we stop to die. We want the dew that honors taste dry. Flags vex a dying face, but the least fan stirred by a friend's hand cools like the rain. Mine be the ministry when thy thirst comes, and Hybla balms, dews of Thessaly to fetch. I think that line, dews of Thessaly, I think that is that sweetness that we mentioned before. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, on the one hand, I think that you're confronted with the greatest despair, and on the other hand, I think that you're confronted with the the power, the real power of love, and both of those things are in a kind of strange balance, like you said, in a kind of rhythm.
adding to there's a shocking sudden belief when you find that love, and I want to read a poem, my last poem, about Rosemary and talk about this. I thought you would go on for my forever. Now I walk a bare path without you. The wind blows against my ears as I struggle to hear you. I find my heart fragmented again. You were beyond courageous as we lived our last days together. I should have sent you more red roses. You said we ended alone. I said we didn't, and you listened. Yesterday I felt and saw your spirit. It was not yet enough. So here I'm expressing my longing to see Rosemary again, and even though I have these really precious memories, I'm grieving. I continue to grieve now, but I do have the memories and the love still, and that's vital to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we were talking about earlier today, in the aftermath of a person's death, what Dickinson describes as an awful leisure. An awful leisure was our belief to regulate. An awful leisure was believed to regulate. That there's a way in which when the obligations to someone dissolve after they die, of course, that suddenly you're left with this kind of leisure, because your responsibility towards that person is also somehow disappeared along with them in a sort of horrible way, and somehow within that gap there is this within that awful leisure there is this this gnawing pain and distress that I think that is like it just slowly it moves from this feeling of an amputation. I think that you just can't get a handle on at all because you just know that emotionally you're not dealing with it, and you're walking through life like that person within a swoon when an open eye would drop them bone by bone, and you're just you go back to your life, but you feel like you're sleepwalking through it just to get through the daily activity, whereas the real content of your life, which is this trauma, is just sitting there, and you know that it would destroy you if you really were able to open your eyes to it. But I think that you do eventually, what happens is you do eventually become sensitized to it. And I think that poem that you just read, Hunter, was just so beautiful, is like that it's like that first moment when you're actually putting together what happened, and you can narrate it, the depth of the emotional experience that we just, can't even access. We don't even have access to. To me, that's like the scary part of it. There's many scary parts, but one of the scary aspects of it is that knowing this weird way in which you're somehow like a zombified version of you is going through your life, while you know that underneath there's this, you know, this emotional content that's just in this trauma that you can't deal with. I think in the middle of, I think that I want to finish with this poem by William Wordsworth, which I think also captures this dynamic between dissociation and grief, but it captures in lateness. I think that's the other. It's like a belated feeling, which is the part of the problem, is that when you're in the moment, it's very, very hard to be mindful, to be able to fully grasp. There is this sort of belated feeling of the loss. Wordsworth wrote this poem, Surprised by Joy, about his daughter who died. And it's almost as if in this poem he grasps, as Hunter does, the magnitude of his daughter's loss in this kind of vision after she's died, sometime after she's died. And he writes, surprised by joy, impatient as the wind, I turn to share the transport. Oh, with whom but thee, long buried in the silent tomb. So it's as if he's surprised by, in the middle of doing something completely different, he's surprised by joy, some joyful, and he turns as in a reflex to share the joy. But then at that moment he realizes that she's gone. It's like I was telling Hunter about how I was going to pack my bags and I saw that my mother had wound this gold tinsel around my suitcase handle, because she knew that this gold tinsel would capture my attention when the suitcase was on the luggage rack or on the carousel, so I would never miss my suitcase. And it's just like that little detail of that loving care, that she was wanting to make sure that I never lost the suitcase, that I never lost my suitcase. She wraps this tinsel around it so it catches your eye, and I think that also is sort of symbolic of not losing her. It's like she is, that gesture of care, and when I saw that, I got tears in my eyes, because it was this moment that she was so thoughtful of me, and it was just that, that this little gold tinsel, that, and how could I forget her, when she hadn't forgotten me. So let me finish the poem here, but I think that was sort of my surprised by joy moment, that, I looked at that tinsel and I thought that she had remembered me, so that I wouldn't forget my luggage. Surprised by joy, impatient as the wind, I turned to share the transport. Oh, with whom but thee, long buried in the silent tomb, that spot which no vicissitude can find. Love, faithful love, recalled thee to my mind. But how could I forget thee? Through what power, even for the least division of an hour, have I been so beguiled as to be blind to my most grievous loss? That word beguiled again, as if one within a swoon. It's as if you're in a trance that you can't access the grief or the loss. That thought's return was the worst pang that sorrow ever bore, save one only, when I stood forlorn, knowing my heart's best treasure was no more, that neither present time nor years unborn could to my sight that heavenly face restore. Right. And so, I mean, I think that's that sense of that forgetfulness and a swoon and loss and grief. He remembers her only fully in this moment when he turns to share this joy with her that she's gone. And that's also happened to me many times when I've thought to share, as we were together with my nephews and my brother last night, and I was thinking to share a photo. I was going to take a photo to send it to her, and then I thought, oh, she's not there, you know. But yeah, so this is the Cyclone Cantata of grief, and thank you for joining us and joining us through this experience of memories of my mother and also of literature and of what literature can teach us about these experiences. And I think that there's much that literature teaches and that life teaches that the myths and the illusions and the comforting illusions that people tell each other don't really prepare us for what we actually face. Did you have any closing thoughts?
Yes, I do. That was excellent, Paul. I was very moved by the Wordsworthian poem. So tender and provocative. Yes, I think that the Cyclone Cantata is very significant in our lives because of Rosemary and what she gave us and continues to give us. And with that, I'll close.
Okay, well, thank you again for joining us on the Jagged Mood podcast, Literature and Life. And this is about as intense as life gets. So thank you for being on this journey with us. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.